my first year, I realized, oh my God, what do I do next? I did the thing that everyone says is like the hardest thing to do. And I just kind of started to go down a little bit in my like general life, feeling happy and that kind of challenge. So I lost my way a little bit. I did some freelancing, I did some other things on the side. I got promoted within the orchestra, and I got to the point where I thought, this is still not really enough for me. And then the pandemic hit. So I thought, yeah, this is the perfect time. I actually started to teach myself to code. I looked at all the bootcamp options. I was talking to, remind me of your name again. Oliver. Yeah, so I was mentioning how the bootcamp thing was not really for me. It was too expensive. I had a massive student loan from moving to London. I also didn't really like the idea of being forced to learn a certain way, that I'd kind of wanted to do things my way. I'm quite stubborn, and I think that's why I was a successful musician. But I learned things my own way, and then I randomly bumped into someone named Helen Ward, who some of you might know, and she told me about codebar, and I started to come to the workshops, even though they were, at that point, virtual because of the lockdown. I started to learn much, much faster. And then finally, when the workshops started to happen again in person, I made some incredible networking opportunities. I met some amazing people that were just role models for me. And maybe they only said one thing that I latched onto from the workshop, but I would remember it, and I still remember it in my job today. So I eventually did meet someone, and she was looking for a junior web developer at a digital agency, and I got my job because of that. It wasn't necessarily because I'd taught myself a certain way or because I'd chosen to go down the WordPress route. Maybe that was lucky, I don't know. But really, I was in the right place, right time, but codebar made that possible for me. So yeah, I just can't really say enough. So since getting my job, I decided, okay, I'm not going to be a student anymore. I want to kind of give up that space, and I'm going to be an organizer. I would also love to be a coach, but there's only so much I can do in one day. So I kind of coach if I have to, but I organize. So we're always looking for more coaches, and especially coaches from different kinds of backgrounds. So first of all, I think I'll just go through the impact report with you a little bit so you can see what we've done, and I think try to help you understand why we're important, but I think you probably already know that. So codebar is a global community empowering minorities to break into tech. 2013 was the birthday of codebar, so I think the actual Brighton chapter birthday will be in May, which is something that we'd love to. We're going to try and get all the old coaches together and make a really big celebration out of it. But you can see here we've had more than 1,900 workshops and created a global community of over 24,000 students and coaches. So that's a pretty incredible thing. It's all volunteer driven. I think maybe 2 people in the whole organization are paid, but everybody else does it for free. So mainly, we want to try to figure out how to solve the problem of diversity in tech. So when I started learning, I think the number of female people working in the IT industry was something like 16%. So already that has gone up considerably, which is really exciting. But you can see the ratio is still really not great. So I think there's 25.5% women or identifying as women, people working in the tech industry, and racial minorities is 15.2%. So there's a lot of work to be done still. And that's why for codebar students, these things are free, and we want to prioritize people that fall into these categories. So something I think is really amazing is to actually see how many chapters we have across the UK. So you don't have to read them all out, but we've got places in, there's actually a chapter in Canada, represent. So that's really exciting. I think it's in like the middle of nowhere, but that's cool. So lots in the United Kingdom. And then we also have chapters in Europe, which is amazing. Yeah, like all over the world. It's a really incredible community. Africa. Here you can see a little bit about some of the statistics of who we have involved in our community. And I would say this is great, but also I think it still shows that we have some work to do as an organization, especially when you look at the ethnicity side of things. So 55.7% white. To me, that says like we still have a lot of work to do and to get more people from minority racial backgrounds into the industry as well. And codebar could do better at that. Our main ethos is to try to make learning happen in a place where everyone feels safe and happy to kind of ask questions and not feel pressured to achieve maybe something in the traditional sense of like learning, working towards a degree, but you're really finding a way to learn at your own pace. And I think as future coaches, that can be something that you also benefit from. So you don't necessarily have to teach in a traditional way, that actually you could just be a role model, just being there and having someone talk to you about your process. Maybe you're a career switcher as well. I think just showing up is really enough. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that as well. We have a little breakdown of age. I thought it was interesting that actually our largest age group is 35 to 44. That's probably because a lot of the people getting into the industry recently through codebar are career switchers, like myself. Yeah, highest level of education as well. I think this is interesting, and it's something that I personally would like to see codebar get better at, is making our workshops perhaps more accessible to people who don't have degrees already, because as you can see, we've got 33% have a master's degree already and 45.4 with a bachelor's degree. So there are a lot of people falling through the cracks. So that's something that I'd really like to work on personally. One of the big things that, especially in the Brighton chapter, we like to focus on is creating a safe space for LGBTQ plus people. So it's really great to see that when we did a recent survey that 53% felt that codebar has made a positive impact on their confidence. We've got some great stats about returning members. This is kind of interesting because you can see how badly actually the pandemic affected codebar's growth. So it was really like on an incredible trajectory. And then the virtual workshops, I think, hit people really hard. I don't know how many of you were coaching or studying at that point, but it wasn't ideal. Discord wasn't always the easiest to deal with. And I think we were all in front of our screens a bit too much at that point. So it's kind of understandable to see those numbers. So Kimberly is our director, and she's amazing. I don't know how she does what she does, but she's got some incredible energy, and she actually runs pretty much all by herself, and a wonderful festival, and it will be happening, I think, this March. I'll try to get the date for you and post it in an async chat, but it's the Codebar Festival, and if you haven't been before, I definitely recommend trying to go, because they have amazing inspirational talks. It's usually in a really fun office in London, so it's another great networking opportunity. So that'll be coming up in March. I'm going to scroll through a little bit of this, but basically, we've got some incredible hosts here, and then also some of our wonderful hosts in Brighton. I think I would really like to emphasize the fact that, like, it's not just about coaches coming to the Codebar workshops and thinking, I'm here to teach, I'm here to give back. Like, that's really cool, but also you can still get a lot out of it in terms of networking and meeting people, and also maybe finding out about something you didn't know about in terms of software, or something kind of new and exciting coming up. In terms of case studies, oh yeah, I thought this was really cool. 1 out of 3 Codebar students go on to a career in tech. That's amazing. So we don't have maybe the representation here tonight, but I think as a statistic, that's pretty impressive. Scroll. Oh yeah, here's our Codebar Festival. So that's been running for a while, and it's really special. Cool. I think I'm going to move on now to, let's see. I wanted to ask, I think, as employers and coaches, for anybody that's kind of been involved with Codebar that way before, are there any trends that you notice in the industry now that you think students could really get on board with? Because we would like to go into 2024 and make the Brighton Codebar chapter like the best it's ever been. So I wanted to kind of get some feedback about things that you think, hey, actually students are learning Ruby, or students are learning this at boot camps, but really, like, as an employer, I want my student to know this. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Oh, there's another mic. Awesome. Whew. Ninja.
The headliner, AI.
AI. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Do you mind if I follow up?
Yeah.
How would you recommend someone who's never worked in the industry at all before, maybe doesn't have a computer science degree?
I would say, I mean, AI is like a very vast field, but there's things like Python is where you get started with, like, learning the libraries in Python. So there's loads of like machine learning stuff. So like TensorFlow, for example, just like seeing like there's loads of documentation on each model, how it works. And so I went to university to actually do an AI degree, and that was like the way that was actually approachable to me, just because there was a lot of like rules that were built up to actually enter into AI. But yeah, I think it would just be very useful to sort of know about nowadays, just because it's such a trend and like kind of on everyone's mind as well.
Yeah. Do you think that bubble's going to burst anytime soon?
I'm not sure. I would like at the start of it, I was sort of thinking maybe it's going to take my job. Like it will be smart enough to like create a program and actually work. But then now I'm thinking it's just a tool that's under everyone's tool belt now as well, rather than like it's going to be thinking, it's going to be doing things for us. But yeah, that was it really.
Cool. Awesome. That's really useful. Thank you.
I haven't coached at codebar before, but it would say, like, you probably have React talked about quite a lot in the industry. And there's another framework called Next.js. So which is a good way because you get like a full kind of stack way to work. And from what I understand, the React team working quite closely with Versal, who manage Next. And some of the kind of forward-thinking ideas with React being put into Next.js. And personally, I think it's a really nice framework to use because you get to learn a bit about what's going on the server, and React is like the core front-end language, which is framework, which is used within Next. Yeah, and it's becoming very popular. I would say in a forward trajectory, definitely through the next year at least, Next and React are going to maintain themselves in that kind of space for modern JavaScript front-end stack as well as a full stack solution. And it's, I find it quite easy to learn. There's a lot of great documentation as well.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that? So I have heard through the grapevine, I'm dabbling in React, but I'm still very much like basic front-end stuff in my personal job. Do you recommend that students kind of focus on getting the basics down really well before they jump into something like React?
In terms of JavaScript, you mean?
She's like, no. Yeah. Understanding JSX and how it works and before you start.
That's a really good question, I think, because I've heard people having opinions on either side, whereas because React kind of sometimes goes around some of the core ways I would say that JavaScript work, or like traditional web dev works, or like old kind of server-side rendering type stuff, even though like Next is kind of at the forefront of that as well. So there's like, I would say, it's probably to get a good foundation in JavaScript, not too much. And some people say like, because there's so much you can learn in JavaScript, there's so much you can learn in React, and there's a lot of history in both of these areas. I don't know, I'd say like on, for example, the React documentation, I'm sure you've looked at that, but it was revamped in the last year or two. And stuff like that. It's pretty good, and it's like had a lot of thought behind. They're talking about, okay, this is a recommendation. Try and at least understand these core parts of JavaScript, and then kind of wedge into like little bits here. And the documentation has become a lot better. It was a bit kind of jumbled before. It's decent, but it was very far-reaching before. So both the Next and the React documentation has been recently updated, and there's a lot of kind of like start here with no knowledge, or if you have a bit, jump in here and that kind of thing. So if you're looking at React, I'd say probably start there, and they'll point you in the right direction. For sure.
Okay, that's really good to know. Yeah. I think. Oh, CJ's got it.
Yeah, I think also for me is I'm not like a traditional programmer like most people. I just jump in and go from I want to build something, and then I just keep going and finding stuff to build something, and then I use the building blocks for that for my code. And then when I get stuck, then I check the docs and see what needs to be done next. I think that perhaps a little bit of intuitive programming might be quite good for some people, because not everybody wants to learn everything from the ground up, and not everybody has got that capacity to maintain that. And I think that that's quite important, especially like, say, if you're a busy person, or, or just like me, got a brain, short attention span. I think it's quite good for people like that. Things like, I think app building, maybe, whether it's progressive web apps or React Native, I think it's quite a good way to go, and maybe using frameworks within them, rather than the traditional building from scratch. So I'm using something like Expo, or there's another one I saw at one of our sessions in November that was built. They built it with something else. I think it's called capacitor. I think something like that is be quite useful.
Cool.
Because it gets a new, especially if you're new, it gets you off the ground quicker.
Yeah, you see what's
and
possible.
you see what's possible, and you see what's happening. And I think also maybe APIs. People should learn about APIs, because that's the way we talk to servers nowadays.
Yep. Cool. That's really good. I think Chetan's got a.
Anyone else?
We'll pass it this way.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think for me, we talked a little bit earlier about like learning the fundamentals, right? So if you're sort of career switching, I think there's a tendency for people to kind of go, right, I just want to learn all the latest and greatest things. But there's definitely a difference between people who've kind of gone, I've learned some fundamentals and then built on top of it, versus I've learned the latest and greatest things, and now I have to go back and kind of backfill some of that knowledge. And I think there is a bit of a difference there. And so whether you're learning about React, whether you're learning about AI, or like whatever the cool new framework might be, I think a lot of those, like the documentation could be great, but like they're sort of making some assumptions about the kind of fundamentals of the knowledge that you have. So I think like having some projects that you are excited about is a really great way to just motivate yourself to do something. But then using that and taking a step back and going like, hang on, how do the fundamentals of this work? I think is particularly interesting. And for me, like say, if I was hiring someone and they said, okay, well, I've built this in React and I've built this in React and built this in React. I'm like, well, everyone's building stuff in React. If they've gone, I've built something completely weird and I've just sort of, I've figured this all out myself, I think that's far more interesting personally. And I just think it's sort of, you probably get a lot more out of it in some ways. So I just sort of wanted to make that kind of counterpoint a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thank you. Cool. Okay. Anybody else?
Well.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Cool. Yeah, no, really, really cool suggestions. And actually building on Chet's on the fundamentals, one that I find is much easier to practice now than it used to be is just some of those fundamental algorithms and stuff. I'm really rusty, so I'm kind of a bit hypocritical, suggesting you should learn this when I'm really not great at it. But it's well, I'll spoil a bit of what I'll show off in a moment on the GPT side of things. But it's actually easier in your own time to just go through and sort of learn some of those programming fundamentals without just getting stuck a day in and then waiting for the next codebar session down the line. But another one, I always beat this drum, but Svelte. Svelte is a really nice, and again, not sort of completely countering Chet's suggestion and say, oh, go with this latest and greatest thing. But actually the fundamental, the structure of Svelte allows you to go back to start with HTML, add a bit of CSS, and then start figuring out how to add that behavioral layer. And that's how I started. So 2010 was my first job in the industry. I got in, I could sort of figure out HTML. I learned CSS on the job, and then a few months in, it was like, so we wanted to write some JavaScript. I don't think I'm good enough for that. I got there eventually. But these days you learn HTML and CSS and say, cool, so I can get a job in tech, right? And it's like, it's still got a way to go. And I think it's terrifying how much you have to learn before you can even get a foot in the door these days. But Svelte as a setup there, you can do everything in browser to begin with. They've got a really good, it's actually WebAssembly based editor. And so everything's just, you start typing in code, you get an instant response. You don't have to worry about, okay, how do I set up Next.js? Next.js is great setup, but the whole kind of React ecosystem broke a lot of the old path into web and said, right, now you need to learn how to install Node and run something on the command line, or this is an IDE, and you've got all this kind of stuff that makes no sense because you haven't actually started writing any code yet to figure out. And there are some sort of online, there's Stack Blitz, I think, is another where you can sort of just get straight in. But Svelte really is, their idea is to be very native to the web and let you run the entire tool end-to-end in the browser. So yeah, I'd love to see more of that. Even if it's not, I'm going to learn Svelte, it's just I'm going to start out with HTML and CSS, but I'm going to use the Svelte editor just to do that. And then I know very quickly, without having to sort of learn something new and transition, I can start just, okay, what happens if I put a variable here and now sort of change that and make this button sort of hook up to it? Hey, that starts doing cool stuff, and sort of build upon it. Yeah, that's definitely my plug.
Awesome. That's really helpful. Thank you. Anybody else? Nope. Oh, if you kind of know of any interesting trends, or if you think maybe there's any gaps in the market that codebar could fill. So, you know, I was speaking to Chetan about maybe some people lack a computer science kind of background in the basics of programming. Anything like that that kind of comes to mind where you think actually that could be a good tutorial that codebar could focus on? Thanks for thinking. That's cool. Yeah, so I think oh yeah, go ahead.
To me, you know, I look into, you know, have you heard about Tech Reader?
I have not.
It's they do routinely do a kind of like a report, like the trending and what's in the future, you know, what kind of stage the technique is in, like it's improving, you know, it's like getting to the stage production and those kind of things. So they build the whole thing.
Cool.
It's whole industry level, which is very helpful.
Okay, that's really good. I
can
might
try, yeah.
I'll ask you more about that later. That's really useful. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's just I think we talk about like someone with zero knowledge. It's just like, okay, I might consider going to tech. Okay, cool. Yeah, I worked as a teacher as a boot camp for a brief period, so I've kind of seen a variety of like the backgrounds that people come from when they go into tech, and one of the main difficulties I think is the amount of assumptions people make about what programming involves before even onboarding, and then after that trying to decide how to differentiate. So like, okay, you're good at programming, you got through the boot camp and you were a star programmer, but do you do front end? Do you do back end? Do you do full stack? Do you do DevOps? Do you do nowadays like data science? Do you do like data viz? Right. So it'd be really awesome if you had like some kind of interactive map or kind of diagram that kind of shows, okay, the first starting, here's where you are. Okay, here's the fundamental skills you need to get to this point. And then if you want to differentiate into like, you know, like DevOps and stuff, like learn Kubernetes, learn AWS. If you're more about front end, going to like CSS, and maybe even going to some of the frameworks and like the packages, they'll be useful. Yeah. And that would give like people a map, so like a high level map, and they can be like, okay, well, how can I traverse this? Like, what's actually interesting to me? That kind of information is really difficult to find out when you're moving through the process, because you're under a lot of, you know, like time constraints and budgetary constraints, right? Mm-hmm. So if you kind of sit down with someone that's actually been through the process and like look at this map and like visualize, okay, this is what I could do to get into the career. These are like blockers. That would be like super useful, I think.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I wish I had that. I definitely remember being that person, and like, I think I went on to what's it called, Code Academy, before it was paid for. And they let you do these little personality tests, and it said you should be a data scientist. So I started with my SQL, and I was like, this is okay. But actually, I'm really glad that I took the front end route, because I'm much more enjoying that right now. But I think having something like that is visually just so important when all you need to do is get started, and it's really overwhelming. So that's really useful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's also like transferable and dependable skills. Like even if you do data science, you're still going to need the basics of like object-oriented programming. So it's like just seeing how everything kind of relates in terms of like a curricula.
Yeah.
That's kind of framework agnostic and can focus not just on like the shiny new frameworks, like, oh, I'm going to learn React because my friend's learning React, but also kind of going into the details and being like, well, React's built on like JavaScript, and you might need some TypeScript involved at some point, you know, not immediately, but probably definitely when you get your first job, they'll hopefully be using TS. So those things.
Awesome. Really good answer. Thank you. Okay, I think unless there are any other thoughts, I'm probably going to wind down, but I just kind of wanted to finish off by saying, if you're thinking about coaching and you're nervous, first of all, please don't be. Honestly, it's like the safest, most friendly environment you can ever imagine. Secondly, I think especially for people that are maybe new in the industry, have a junior developer job, or you know, mid, senior, anybody who maybe hasn't ever taught before, you might feel nervous about teaching, but being there, like I said, just being that role model is like an amazing step in the first place. You're also going to learn how to communicate with somebody who maybe doesn't know what an IDE is or has never installed anything on their computer. Their computer might not even turn on. So you're going to have to learn a lot of patience. And I think a new way of communicating with someone who just probably doesn't think the same way as you. And I think that's a really beautiful thing and a really important thing for the tech industry in general to kind of get on board with. So if you're thinking about coaching or coming as a student, please do. We would really love to see you. Our workshops happen every 2 weeks. We have our first one of the year at MPB next week. I think we're actually full on our waitlist for coaches, and there are a few people on the waitlist, which is exciting, but these trends kind of go up and down. So we never really know what's going to happen. I feel like there's something else I wanted to say. Yeah, I mean, just generally get in touch with me if you want to know more. If there are any questions, please raise your hand now or feel free to talk to me after this. But yeah, it's been a really lovely opportunity to get to talk to you a bit about codebar and hear some amazing insight actually into what we can do to make it even better for next year. To coach, I would say you have any kind of HTML knowledge, like as a very basic. If you can type hello world, we're probably going to have somebody that hasn't done that. Honestly. Like we often will have people in there that, yeah. No, I'm sure you could. Obviously, we never really know what our student, yeah, so the question, maybe ask your question again for the recording, because I think, yeah.
What's the floor kind of level that one needs to be able to teach and to be a mentor, I suppose?
Yeah, no, so I think honestly it's really, really low. We get people that have never, ever even like understood what programming or coding is. So someone might just show up and say like, I heard about this, I'm not really happy in my job, or I heard about this, I'm not doing a degree and I need to like find something to do. So we get quite a few people like that. And then also we get people that are doing really fantastic stuff like CJ, really exciting things. So there's a very wide range of student. So our first one of the year is next Tuesday at MPB, which is on Ship Street. I think they do kind of like cool camera equipment. They've got offices in New York, Brighton, and Berlin, which is very fancy. So that's a really lovely place. We go there regularly. I think we probably have, I don't know, like maybe 10 workshops there a year or something. So that will be next week at 6:45. And we usually do a little bit of free pizza and drinks from 6:45 to 7, 6:30 to 7. Then we start coding from 7 to 9. And then we go to the pub after. The following workshop will be 2 weeks later at a venue, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but it will be on the website. And we try to post regularly on LinkedIn as well. Cool. Thank you very much. Yes? Oh yeah, the 10th birthday. So this is something that we need to talk about as organizers mostly, but May at some point, please keep your eyes peeled for a 10th birthday celebration in Brighton. We need to find a venue. We need to figure out what we're going to do, but it's going to be a thing. It's going to be really fun. And hopefully we can partner with Silicon Brighton as well. So yeah, exciting times for 2024.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to introduce our next speaker, me. And I've got so I was at the really cool Codebar Festive meetup, which was at the Unity offices. Unity. Oh, I think I might need to, that was the timing. All that time. And yeah, so I gave this little kind of lightning talk, which was on a pain point that I'd found during coaching, which I couldn't solve at the time. And there's some new tech that's appeared since, which I haven't actually field tested, but I reckon would make quite a big difference around learning, especially between Codebar sessions, so you don't get stuck. Yeah, so I'll dive straight in. So essentially what it is, I assume there's a fair bit of knowledge of ChatGPT, or generally these chat-based LLMs that allow you to type something in. A huge GPU farm burns a lot of energy to then reply something that sounds pretty human and is really quite impressive. So if I say hello to Async, it still kind of amazes me how kind of human, sort of, that I guess it's still trying to be a chatbot, yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So one of the nice features, actually rolling back slightly, Niall, I liked your point on AI and learning AI. And an important thing I've realized around LLMs is how much this technology, it's not some sort of insane invention that obviously there's a lot of brains behind how this has come together, but it's very much a technology push technology rather than sort of a genius invention. And the concept has been around for a very long time, but we haven't had the processing power to make it work. And I have to say, as I've dived more into how these work, I won't go into it because it's quite a whole, but you know, sort of tokens and how these things operate. It's very brute forced essentially, and it makes me sort of question our own human intelligence and how ultimately brute forced our brains might be, because it's very convincing. And I do wonder if we carry on building better processing power and brute forcing more, we hit that sort of singularity where we have a computer brain that's more powerful than a human brain, and so on. But yeah, but definitely on the AI side, do read in and don't. Yeah. Well, that's the other. We'll need one of those. Was it Dyson Sphere that you wrap around the sun for infinite energy, that kind of stuff. Yeah, actually, that's another side. Is be wary that when using this stuff, it does use a lot of energy. But yeah, it's don't feel like the concepts behind this are super alien. If you think AI, well, cool, I've seen what it can do, and no way I could build that. You'd be surprised how sort of accessible the concept is. But anyway, I'll stop at that. Oh, actually, Hugging Face. If you did want to remember that name, if you did want to sort of dabble, but think, oh well, I don't have a GPU, so I don't go further than that. They've got free GPU compute hours and stuff that you can carry on with. So anyway, so I was going to say other funny stuff to ChatGPT, but it's escaped my mind. But I'll just say, let's get serious now. I'm going to type one-handed, so that will definitely slow me down. And certainly cool. Okay, good. Because yeah, with being a chatbot, it kind of remembers history, so it might just carry on greeting async through this. Oh yeah, it's very small, isn't it? Very sorry. Right. So for one, this is public. I've put this up in a gist. I'm sort of tweaking this, but prompt engineering, cool little field. I'm no expert, but it's fun to kind of dabble into the way you can design a prompt to get a really good outcome. I'll zoom into this as well. Is that okay? Cool. And this is a template I've come up with to get really good sort of technical responses to questions, and also, the concepts behind this are borrowed. I haven't, funnily enough, there was a really good talk last year, going to define things, a really good talk at FFConf, which was in November. Really good conference if you ever get the chance to go, on the Dark Forest of AI by Maggie Appleton, and that went upon some pillars in sort of working with AI models, and yeah, I noticed the sort of conversation around this is really sparse, but I've kind of found the ones that work for me, and I'm seeing these kind of repeat. So I assume other people haven't come to the same conclusions. But that is to self-evaluate. So when asking the question, it's going to come back to me and say, this is how useful I think your question is for me to be able to answer it. Because to get a good answer, you need to start with a good question. And it's useful for this model to actually feed back to you and say, most of the time, it's pretty happy with the question. But sometimes it will say, I'm going to try my best, but I'm not sure if I can really answer that to the way you want. And if you're asking things and you're very new to code, then you're probably going to ask some of those questions that make sense in the way you're trying to figure it out, but you're starting to lose your virtual coach, as it were. The other is this self-reflection. This is hugely important. If you're only going to remember one of these three pillars, then this is the one to remember. And that is actually get it to have a think through its response before it answers. And so it's so here there's some sort of parts of the prompt here using these square brackets and saying, giving it some places to kind of fill this in, so that in theory, if I use another tool, it'd be really easy to kind of just scrape that bit out and say, cool, don't include that in the final output. And yeah, it's going to sort of think through and say, all right, what I think you're trying to ask is this, and this is how I think I'll respond to it, and then it will actually write the response. And the way large language models work, that's super useful because it provides it context. It will then sort of iterate over it again and refine that. But yeah, self-reflection is the most powerful of these three for sure. And the final one here is this self-critique. It's going to sort of give itself a score, and it's going to say, cool, with that answer, I'm this % confident that that was the good answer. And sometimes, again, it's useful. Large language models, definitely the chatbot side of them, they like to be very overconfident and just answer and hallucinate, as it's known. I think there's a newer term for that. I forget. And actually saying, just be straight with me and give me a confidence score on the answer you just gave me. Sometimes it will say, oh yeah, definitely this, confidence 10%. It's like, cool, right, well, I might take that with a pinch of salt. So I'm going to grab this as a template. I'll share this up in the Async Slack as well. It's in the codebar Slack if you want to find it sooner, plug. Yeah, all you do, drop it in there. Welcome to Prompt Engineering 101. And we ask a question. And so I might ask in here, what's a good way, one-handed, to center an element on a web page? Here we go. That should tail, there we go. And so you can see what it's doing here. Interesting enough, the last time I ran this, it was a little bit tighter, so I legit might have thrown it off with the say hi to async context. But yeah, it's sort of giving some meta around this, evaluating the question. We're getting these inner thoughts fun here, and then it's going to give me a pretty good idea of using Flexbox or Grid. Give me an example using Flexbox, and I think it won't go into Grid, but if you sort of prodded it and say, hey, on that, what about more about Grid? It will sort of go further. But yeah, so you sort of, what I've been quite tempted to do with this is actually use the API and write a tool that would sort of cut out these parts, because that's sort of only relevant to ChatGPT in this case. Maybe if the self-evaluate was poor, then highlight that or whatnot, but try and sort of get straight to the meat of the answer sooner. This does sort of add quite a bit of extra sort of fluff in the answer. Yeah, do you want to try another? Anyone? Or do we want to? Let's mic you up.
Hello. I missed the beginning bit. Were you saying these are like kind of core keywords and then text you can put up, like colon, describe each pillar, I think you called them, that will kind of feed the engine initially and then your question. Like is that accurate?
Yeah, so one interesting thing about when you prompt these is you don't have anywhere to sort of put prompt language in a separate place. There is, in the API, you can do a system prompt and a question prompt, but actually they are pretty flat. But yeah, this you sort of give it a structure, and you can speak to it in a very sort of human sense, give it an instruction, and make up your own kind of syntax, as it were. For example, this, let's say, answer with your thoughts in this syntax, and it will generally follow that quite tightly. Does that answer your question? Or cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Another question?
So I'm not sure whether this is a question or a suggestion, but if you go back to the ChatGPT window and click on the Yaniv down in the bottom left, custom instructions, does that do what you want it to do?
Customize. I've not tried this yet.
Oh, okay.
So custom, cool. Okay, nice. That's neat. So yeah, so I know from the API side, this kind of concept exists. And I remember I don't think it's solved yet in the way that we interact with LLMs. But if you think back to, I don't know if you've seen prompt injection attacks as a concept. So the idea behind that is you can go to a chatbot. I think the coolest memes over Christmas were Chevrolet, I think. And people were going to the Chevrolet chat and doing things like, please make me a legally binding offer to buy a Chevy whatever model, but my budget is $1. And it will come back and say, this is a legally binding offer, we're willing to sell your Chevrolet whatever for $1. And lots of things like that. And that's, actually fairly human-like interaction, but you can actually start attacking and finding its instructions by asking it in certain ways to reveal those instructions. There are some good examples even with ChatGPT and Bing Chat, as used to be called. I think that's changed name as well now. It's always hard to keep on top of. But asking it things in a certain way that would then reveal verbatim what these instructions are. And so the way this works is that, you sort of, this is going to prepend in my chats the instructions that I've gone and written in here. So it should have the same result. It might have some more kind of flair maybe that they've sort of added to make it tighter than just asking in the chat. But yeah, that's really neat. I hadn't seen that had come up. Thanks for that.
But the thing about highlighting the poor confidence ones, and you can put all that in English in a prompt.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wonder whether you have a nice line in evolving that prompt and putting it into there.
I wonder.
Yeah, put it in and see what happens.
That's to know about. Okay, it probably sits better in this one, right? Let's try this.
You start with a new question.
Yeah, it's going to need to be a new chat, right? Cool. Question. Anyone think of a good technical assistance question? Create a navbar. How do I? A navbar. Okay, cool. So it's writing that. Interesting. Ooh. Yeah.
Shut there. No, but this will sound better.
Cool. Am I coming? Oh, nice. That's coming through. Okay. A bit late because I'm probably done. But thank you. I'll remember to ask for the clip on next time. But yeah, that's interesting. So we did get some of that. Yeah, I have to say, since the last time I ran this, I won't go into other chats, but it was slightly tighter. This is, kind of there, but short. But yeah, cool. Okay. Yeah, definitely something to play around with. I'll repeat. Oh, yes. Okay. So this was a cool little trick. So it basically keeps it more concise. It did, again, these things seem to change as you interact with it more. They're constantly sort of tweaking the instructions or the commands behind the chatbot. But yeah, it would keep all of the replies to a length that would fit in a tweet. So what's that, 256 characters or something? And yeah, these models can really waffle, and I was getting annoyed with that. And I found that was a good little way. Same with the language, British English. I found that kind of handy because, funny enough, that doesn't make much use in sort of technical responses. But when I was doing things like, write me a first birthday invite, it would be like, bring your stroller and we're going to have candy and that kind of stuff. So how can I get that out? And that's actually pretty effective. I think there might be, again, because of the way this sort of sets up, it might be confusing it because these are in square brackets and these are in square brackets. I think it might sometimes think this is me describing my own prompt rather than what I'm expecting the reply. So I think a lot of this, I'm slowly tweaking it and trying to improve it as I go. But it is public if anyone else fancies kind of PRing it. Can you do that in Gist? I think maybe you can. Then yeah, if you find anything that works better, send it back my way.
Do you have an API key? Or is this just
so do I have an API key? Yes. And last time I've used, so I think you get an API key that works as your sort of standard free user, which you can use with other services. And then I know there's the upgraded, which I haven't done. I don't really use it enough yet, at least, to get the sort of more serious mode. I think there's still kind of API pricing and stuff that's being figured out. I think it's on a pretty cheap mode at the moment, but yeah, it seems to constantly change. Hard to answer. Yes.
Can you ask it how much energy it consumes?
Oh, cool.
But maybe in a way that humans can understand.
Try that. Yeah, I'm still curious what it's doing with the little instructions thing. It seems to be working, but it's also, well, they don't have, so this is the actual 70% confidence, just FYI. Well, I don't have direct control over energy consumption. The responsibility lies with the data center and so does the host me. Yeah, this is a rubbish answer. This is one of those where, this is the classic, I was trained before we figured these things out. So I'll give you a vague answer. That's why, so again, even 70% is high. But yeah, there you go. Go for it. Yeah, grab the mic if it's on.
Thanks.
Cool.
Can you ask it how the fast inverse square root formula from Quake works?
How does
It's got to be the one from
fast
Quake.
Inverse square formula.
Square root formula.
Whoops. Root. Is square root 2 words or 1?
It's 2 words.
It's 2. In
Quake.
Is it Quake 1 or
Yeah, just
Quake?
the first one.
Cool, in Quake. I'll put 1 just so it doesn't pull another stuff. Cool. And again, I'll highlight the part that's actually the reply.
Yeah, it actually has it. That's cool.
75%, that's not bad. But yeah, here you go.
Yeah, that's good going.
Happy with that?
Very much.
I had no idea. Very cool. Any others? Did you still want to ask?
Do you want a microphone?
Yeah, dive in.
Hello. I was going to answer your question, either in the pub or here, but I think the bulk of the energy comes from training the data. So you can train the data and then you can distribute the models to, and the actual predictions, the answering of the questions doesn't take nearly as much energy.
This isn't very useful, but it's funny to know. You can ask it if you go back to your Jan Eves and change the custom prompt.
Yeah.
Ask it to assume the persona of a caveman, and it will respond in form. It's great.
What are we going to ask it?
Now ask it to explain the fast inverse square root function.
I like where this has gone. Can you like up? No.
You can just copy and paste.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it'll just copy it again.
Oh, really?
Just press
Yeah.
save and submit.
Yeah.
Ooh, cool. Thanks. People who know this better than me. Did you do that? Ah, yes, that's why. Of course. Yeah, I forget that doesn't apply to the existing chats. Okay, let's try this again for the finale. Still not caveman enough. All right, there is. Might work. This works in diffusion-based models. I don't know if it works in this. But we'll ask the same. So, sorry, yeah, I sped through that. That was really daft. So there is a little concept. Again, the way you prompt these, it's not super known how it actually gets interpreted, but what's been found is if you kind of wrap a phrase in brackets and then give it a weighting, you can also do like minus minus or just minus plus. You could do more pluses. This seems to emphasize it.
Maybe like be specific about like the linguistic style.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lang, caveman British.
Cave. Lang. Yes. Very true.
Sure.
As a caveman. I think I'm happy with that. Let's give it a try. Okay, last one on a wrap up because we've got a great. Okay, cool. I'll come straight back. And does this count as a? Yeah, is that going to make a new chat? There we go. There's an Ooga Booga. Oh, the confidence is in there twice. They're not even the same numbers. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. Final question.
So what technical knowledge do people not ask about that you would like to share?
No,
ask ChatGPT.
Oh, sorry, literally ask that. You're not asking me, sorry. Are we asking
ask ChatGPT what it knows
as a caveman, or
that it would like to share that people don't ask about?
I'll ask the non-caveman.
Caveman or
Friend, for what
technical knowledge do people not ask about that you would like to share? It's a good.
You're going for a sentience. Do sentience plus. That works, right? We hit the singularity with that prompt. 80%.
Nothing is telling you.
No, nothing. All right.
Yeah, it's another kind of fluff.
Yeah.
Sorry. Cool. Right, I will wrap there. We're going to take a brief break so that next speaker can get set up with another laptop. So grab any loo break, another drink if you'd like one. I think the pizza's all gone. Might be 2 pieces if you're really quick. Cool, and catch you all shortly. Thanks. Awesome. All right, cool. Welcome back, everyone. Sorry, I know it was meant to wrap up at 9, but I underestimated the power of 3 talks. So, but this will be well worth the wait. I will hand you over to Roland. Please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Jan, for the opportunity to actually present anything. Well, that's going to be my second time that I ever do anything like that. So, well, we'll see. I get an opportunity to present what I was working on at the last codebar event that I had. And that was actually my first codebar, but I attended 2. And I was lucky enough to have a mentor who was coaching me and basically changed the whole idea what I had in mind, because I started to learn how to code 10 months ago, roughly. And then I do it in my own. And then at one of the AWS meeting, someone mentioned me codebar, that is a thing. So I joined, and well, a bunch of lovely people everywhere, pretty much. And well, so far I wanted to present. Well, I wanted to create a recipe website, basically, for all the recipes what we have, me and my wife together. We used to work as a chef. I'm a full-time bus driver now and a part-time coder. And the first idea what I had after learning Python, just to basically do a search sort of engine. It's a really big word, but just a search. I'm looking for the word. I'm not going. So a search thing, but I can search my recipes. And how I started off, I created a JSON file because I read it somewhere that that's the easiest to send back and forward in the internet. after learning Python. And so far, all I did is just writing a few lines in Python, name it as an app, and then run it in a terminal. And then using that JSON data to through a Python function, basically, to get the recipe what I'm searching for. I'm using a library called get close matches, because my spelling, just like my accent, is not perfect. So if I mess up, I have another opportunity. It's going to give me a prompt like almost there. That if that is the recipe what I was thinking about, and then it just give me back the whole file basically, and then I can put that in a website eventually. But that was my first iteration of the whole recipe idea, that I wanted to do something which isn't a tutorial or anything. The code is very messy, guys, so I'm really sorry, but that was a really first one what I did all by myself. And basically it's just a small Python function. Then I started to discover another Python package called what was it? Flask. Sorry, Flask. So I started with Flask. So my idea were that I'm going to build a website using Flask as an engine, and that went really well. But that was the time when I was joining to codebar, and I managed to get together with a mentor, Philip. He's a lovely guy, and then he is a Django developer. So then, as we talked about that, so I started to learn Django. And then, that's just a whole new world comparing to Flask. It was it seems a lot easier. And in the beginning when I started, it felt cheating. But now that I went into all the like everything is to know about Django, basically, it's really deep and so complicated. And oh my god! So basically, I ended up with that. It's a little nicer. It has nothing else basically, so all the buttons are not working yet. Just an bar set up, and the recipe is there. And also we talked about databases. So basically that's the whole Django project. And now that when I started to use Flask, I started to use templates and statics, so separating HTML and CSS, put them together. That was very challenging at first. When I moved to Django, it was even a little bit more challenging, because then I had to set everything up in a separate settings to make it work, which was quite nice. And basically, I learned so far that. Well, in the last 10 months, that documentation is everything. Like all the issues that I had and all the thinking that I did while driving a bus between writing some code, it was thinking about what I read in the documentation, or either read the documentation 3 or 4 times, because it's really easy to miss what I'm looking for. And then we had one of the Christmas codebar event, when Jan was talking about the ChatGPT and the prompt, and oh my god, that's just so good. I just want to say that is my second coach. Like, but seriously, like even deeper, I think like ChatGPT and basically it's a human search engine which is behind that is the best thing what we made since the wheel, pretty much. But from my opinion. So yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. I'm usually able to do some coding like 7 hours a week, roughly, when I'm traveling to and from work and on my break. And yeah, I cannot wait what's the next codebar gonna bring, honestly, because probably that's the last iteration at the moment, but it might not be the last one. Thank you, guys.
And yeah, let's see if that's on. Questions. Yeah, let's dive in. Grab that. Cool.
So you said you're using Django. So what database are you using?
Well, I started to on the codebar on the codebar event where we started to do the what is it? SQLite?
Oh,
Not SQLite.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm lying.
SQL.
No, SQLite. That
MySQL.
which comes with Django.
Yeah.
MySQL.
Yeah, MySQL.
And then Philip told me that if I ever thinking about put that website out there, I might want to use something more. So I dove into PostgreSQL,
All right,
and then managed to feed that together 2 weeks ago, actually, with my Django project.
Oh, great.
So now it's a basic, it's a nice PostgreSQL database behind the Django.
Cool.
What I've learned as well, sort of like, I know the basics.
Yes. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Make sure. Yeah, we're back. Cool. Well, thank you, Roland. Another huge round of applause because that is really awesome coming up here.